My name is Selena. I'm a newbie, just graduated from college and got a job. Selena, you're still in training, aren't you? What's training like? Any cool colleagues or seniors? On my day off, my childhood friend Nina, who's been with me since kindergarten through college, asks with keen interest. She went on to grad school, so she's still a student. She bombards me with questions, curious about the corporate world I've stepped into ahead of her. The general training is done. Now I'm training in various departments. My company is kind of like a sports club, you know? We start the morning with exercises. There's even a shout out. What? That's unusual. It is. Health comes first, which I totally get. We even have activities like clubs. Right now, there's tennis, football, and a jogging club. Are you forced to join? Not at all. But newcomers are encouraged to try out any clubs they're interested in a few times, then decide if they want to join. Wow, what a fun company. What about you, Selena? I joined the jogging club. I wouldn't exercise on my own, and it seemed like a good way to stay fit. Plus, it's at my own pace, not too strict. That's admirable. I wouldn't join any. I don't like exercising. Aha! You can quit anytime, and it's a good way to network, especially for newbies. It's a chance to meet people from other departments. Oh, I see. It's like an extension of a club where you can interact across different ages and departments, which is fun. Though my company isn't very large, the camaraderie, perhaps thanks to these extracurricular activities, is strong among employees and part-timers alike. Even though I'm only in my first year, I already like the company and want to do my best. But don't you seem a bit tired despite all that? Wow, you notice everything, don't you? I'm impressed by my friend's sharp observation. Indeed, I like the company's atmosphere, and I don't mind being busy, but there is one person who has become a significant concern for me. Thinking of quitting? Young people nowadays really have no perseverance. You've been useless from the start. I hear Mrs. Smith's voice, the president's wife, chiding Catherine, a part-time worker who has been absent for a few days. They should be in a private room used for meetings and interviews, but the door is intentionally left open, and Mrs. Smith's shrill voice spills out onto the floor. The open door seems to be her way of showing that the conversation is meant to be heard by everyone, cornering the person she's talking to. Catherine must be feeling intimidated. You're taking off without notice and neglecting your duties for days, and now you want to quit? Don't think you can just escape because it's a part-time job. I won't let you use your paid leave. I'll deduct from your salary for the days you missed. Her tone has gone beyond sarcasm. It's almost terrifying. The last day Catherine came to work, I saw her with tears in her eyes. Are you okay? Did something happen? I got scolded by Mrs. Smith again. I'm doing my job seriously, but she just doesn't seem to like me. I've been feeling unwell lately. She spoke in a trembling, faint voice. It must have taken a lot of courage for her to come in for the last time and tender her resignation. Paid leave and resignation are workers' rights, and I wish Mrs. Smith would just let her be without any further bullying, I thought with a sigh. This was the third time I'd witnessed such an incident in just 3 months since joining the company. Mrs. Smith, who's also an executive, seems to be in charge of human resources. However, she leaves the actual HR work to the department heads and employees, appearing only interested in controlling aspects like hiring, firing, and assignments. She has a few favorite young male employees, and she's all sweet and gentle when speaking with them. And apparently, women who get along with her favorites become targets of her unreasonable bullying. This is what I've heard from the seniors in the jogging club, and it seems to align with what I've seen and heard. Mr. Smith, the president and her husband, is usually out working hard himself and is rarely in the office. When he is around, she doesn't show her anger, so he probably doesn't know about her behavior. And there's no one who could possibly report it to him. Mr. Smith is a man of character who respects the opinions of his employees, even in his busy schedule. It's hard to believe that his wife, Mrs. Smith, could be such a person. Perhaps having accepted the resignation, Mrs. Smith emerged from the conference room, searching through papers as she walked across the floor. Tears brimmed in Catherine's eyes, following behind. It takes effort to replace staff, you know. Find someone for the part-time job. Finish the handover, then you can leave. That's common courtesy, right? Mrs. Smith's plea for agreement sent a wave of tension through the employees present. Everyone pretended to focus on their work, yet they couldn't ignore her, nodding reluctantly. Amidst this, "Oh, you look like you want to say something." Well. It seems my empathetic gaze towards Catherine had caught Mrs. Smith's attention, sizing me up. "If you're getting paid, you should take responsibility for your job, whether you're a full-time employee or a part-timer." Yes. Her words were correct, if taken at face value. I had no choice but to agree, despite my objections. "Good. It's unacceptable to take time off on a whim or quit in the middle of a contract period, isn't it?" Yes, but I mean, the moment I began to object, I was met with a glare that silenced me. "Remember, self-centered behavior is not acceptable. Order is important. Those who work properly, I do appreciate, right?" In the end, I couldn't say anything, and Catherine remained bowed, like an example for all. Later, some sales employees returned, and Mrs. Smith, perhaps seeing her favorites among them, approached them with a bright smile, a stark contrast to her earlier demeanor. I'm frustrated with myself for not being able to do anything for Catherine, and for giving in to Mrs. Smith. Ugh, it's hard to believe such people exist. No wonder you're stressed. Sorry, I didn't mean to vent. It's okay, you shouldn't bottle it up. And you really couldn't argue, could you? If you did, you'd be the next target. Be careful. You're right. By the way, there was a senior from the jogging club among the sales staff. He came to talk to me afterward, and I felt really watched. Eek, scary. Is that senior good-looking? Maybe he's one of Mrs. Smith's favorites. I'm not sure. Oh, but more importantly, I remembered and changed the subject. Remember the trip we talked about? I couldn't decide between the two hotels you mentioned. Both are lovely, but since Grandpa and Grandma love seafood, I'm thinking of going with this one. What do you think? Right, that was the main topic. She's well-versed in traveling with her family and had been advising me. If they love fish, then yes, this one's the right choice. My fussy grandmother was very satisfied with it, so it's definitely a good pick. My friend recommended it confidently, with a smile. I'm glad. I've been wanting to show my appreciation, and I hope they'll be happy. I had been saving up little by little for a trip with my grandparents, Curtis and Ashley, who raised me after my parents passed away when I was young. They always put me first and supported me, and I wanted to give something back. So I decided to take them on a trip, choosing a luxury hotel to treat them, thanks to my savings from part-time jobs during college and my first paycheck. Traveling with their granddaughter will surely make them happy. They'll love it. Yeah. Her smile made me smile as well. However, on the Friday afternoon before the trip, Mrs. Smith called me in. "Here, the resumes and job histories of new part-time job candidates. Compile these into the data, and make interview sheets too." Isn't that HR's job? Why me?" "Well, as a newcomer, you should be experiencing different kinds of work, right? You seemed interested in HR work when that part-timer quit the other day." How did it come to this? I disliked sympathizing with Catherine, but it wouldn't do any good to object. "How long do I have?" "By Monday morning." "What, next week?" "Of course." "Please wait. Today is Friday. I have my own work to finish too." "Finish your tasks first, then work on this. You can come in over the weekend. I'll make sure you're compensated for working on a holiday." She smiled sweetly. Her beautiful smile looked to me like the grin of a witch. "We have interviews scheduled for Monday, so don't be late. Oh, and look at past files to summarize the trends of those who were hired. Here, take this." A thick file was placed before me. Is all of this mine to do? Confused and at a loss for words, she said triumphantly as if she had won. "I'm glad you understand. You've been ignoring directions and acting frivolously at work lately. Getting off to a good start is crucial." I had no idea what she was referring to. Unable to tolerate such baseless accusations, I decided to speak up. "With all due respect, it's Friday and there are less than 2 hours left in the workday. I also have my current assignments. It's impossible to finish all this by the start of next week. even with overtime. I tried to keep my tone as calm as possible while holding back my boiling frustration. Ever since Catherine's resignation, it seemed she had pegged me as her next target, subtly harassing me. She'd make requests for errands or shopping specifically when I was busiest, give incorrect copying instructions, then blame me for delays in meetings. Even during jogging club activities, I'd feel her sharp gaze on me. I'd been managing the daily stress, but the prospect of it affecting the trip I was looking forward to was too much, especially being given an unmanageable amount of work that wasn't even my responsibility. She seemed unfazed by my objections. That's why I said you could come in over the weekend. Oh, and HR materials are confidential, so don't take them home. Wait a minute. I tried to argue, but she cut me off. I have plans now, so I must go. Please take care of it. And with that, she left. The next day, as planned, I was under the open sky on a trip with my grandparents. They looked at me with concern, stifling yawns. Are you sure you're okay? Going on a trip right after an all-nighter. We can postpone it if you need to. Don't worry, I was really looking forward to today's trip. Despite my reassurances, they were worried about me rushing back just in time for departure after working all night. I had informed them, but I must have caused concern the night before. No, this trip is supposed to be fun. I have to make sure they enjoy it. I psyched myself up internally and smiled at my grandparents. Look, the sea is so beautiful. I'm glad it's sunny. Hey, don't worry about me. We're close to the sea, so the seafood will be delicious. Can't wait. Showing excitement, they finally relaxed and started to take in the scenery. But even amidst the joy, an unbelievable nightmare awaited. Did you finish the work I assigned? You didn't just abandon it, did you? A familiar voice intruded on my ears while I was checking into the hotel and wandering the halls alone. Mrs. Smith? It felt as if Beethoven's Fate was playing in my head. I felt it. Why is the witch here? Of all places to run into her? As if hearing my internal monologue, she laughed mockingly. I gave you homework to ruin your floating weekend plans, yet here you are, ignoring my instructions. Her words echoed like a witch's curse, making my head spin. Are you saying you deliberately assigned me work to coincide with my trip as harassment? Knowing about my plans and sabotaging them with impossible demands filled me with anger. Anger arises. But how did you know where I would be staying? I knew she sometimes eavesdropped on the female employees, but I was astonished she would go this far. Weren't you chatting happily during lunch break and at the jogging club? Going on about where you'll go, how nice it must be, flaunting it. It's laughable. Eavesdropping? It's your fault for boasting about it. Realizing that even casual conversations with colleagues and seniors had been carefully monitored chilled me to the bone. Anyway, this hotel is above your station. What? I looked puzzled, and she sighed dramatically. Do you not understand? This is a luxury hotel, not a place for someone like you. You're an eyesore. A payroll thief and a good-for-nothing should go to the old hotel next door. I managed to suppress the anger welling up inside and said, I don't understand what you mean. I get that you find me bothersome, but the rest is just harassment and insult, isn't it? I wasn't shirking work, nor had I done anything to her, yet I was subjected to her unreasonable attacks every day. And why should my precious time with my grandparents be ruined? That's it. I was about to make a decisive retort, perhaps even if it meant resigning, when it happened. So that's what this is about. A calm voice, out of place in this tense situation, came from behind. Grandma! Grandpa, too! I thought my grandparents were back in the room having coffee, but there they were, standing behind me. Judging by their expressions, they had heard almost the entire conversation. This is... I began, flustered, trying to explain, but my grandmother interrupted me and addressed Mrs. Smith. Pleased to meet you. I'm Selena's grandmother, Johnson, who has been acting as her parent for many years. The honorific chairman of Johnson Products, the company that had dealings with yours recently, would be a faster introduction. Grandma greeted her with a relaxed tone. Mrs. Smith's face turned pale upon hearing that. J. Johnson Products? Her voice squeaked in surprise. The industry leader? And you're the honorific chairman? But the employee here has a different surname. Well, that's not strange at all. My daughter didn't take her husband's name when she married. She changed to his surname instead. Being part of a renowned founding family of a famous company, she preferred to stay under the radar. No. As for this child, perhaps she takes after her mother. She could have joined our company, but she wanted to job hunt on her own to earn her place. I'm terribly sorry. I had no idea. Mrs. Smith's face drained of color. Do you think being unaware gives you the right to commit any kind of rudeness? Or do you differentiate people by their family background? No, that's not. In contrast to my serene grandmother, Mrs. Smith was sweating and frozen, despite her well-made-up face. I wonder if you could pass a message to your president. The business deal your staff discussed with us the other day, we'll be considering it void. No, please wait. Ignoring Mrs. Smith's almost shrieking voice, my grandmother continued. I heard that the company my granddaughter joined was focusing on health first, even having sports clubs, and it seemed like a fun place to work, Grandma said, with Grandpa nodding beside her. And after the recent business meeting, we heard Mr. Smith was a man of good character, suitable for a good partnership. But to think Mrs. Smith is such a person? What a shame. While maintaining her calm tone, my grandmother sharply cut her off. Let's go, Selena. Turning to me, she said with a smile. Wait, the deal! Mrs. Smith, quivering, tried to cling to my grandmother's back, but Grandma dismissed her with, It's too late to change your attitude now, leaving her collapsed on the spot. Please, could you mediate something for me? I don't mind about the work from yesterday. Just... After being coldly dismissed by my grandmother, Mrs. Smith turned to me with an astonishingly quick change of face. I refuse. And for the record, I didn't abandon the work you dumped on me yesterday. I completed it before I came here. Check it tomorrow. I was filled with a desire to shout back at her for all the injustice I had endured. But following my grandmother's example, I even managed to answer with a smile. And then, at the company on Monday, the sales department, having been thrilled about the deal with Johnson Products, was abuzz with the news that the deal was off. Apparently, Mrs. Smith had done something. Look here! Mrs. Smith, looking frantic, approached me. Did you already communicate the cancellation of the deal? It's too sudden from yesterday to today. I'm sorry, but I have no insight into Johnson Products' actions. And you, arranging the interview materials. I hear you had everyone in HR help you. What authority does a newcomer have to do such a thing? I gave the permission. Huh? The one who entered saying that was Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith, good morning. Everyone greeted him in unison. You? The appearance of her husband, the president, seemed to startle her. Last Friday night, when I returned from a business trip and came to this floor for some work, I saw the newcomer. Her, rushed off her feet with work, and everyone else looking worried but not helping. Something seemed off, so I asked her what was going on. Prompted by Mr. Smith, he explained to her, still not grasping the situation. Mrs. Smith had given me HR work to complete by the start of the week, and instructed me to work over the weekend if necessary, but I realized that it was impossible to do it all by myself. Just then, Mr. Smith arrived, and I was able to consult with others around. I talked to the HR staff, too. They said you forced the work onto her and expressly forbade anyone from helping her. The need for interview preparation is real, but analysis and summation of past files weren't urgent. Why did you give her HR work in the first place? That's because, as a newcomer, she should experience everything, right? She said she was interested in part-time job recruitment. I hadn't said that, but she was sticking to her usual forceful logic. I thought to myself, classic witch. I thrust into my heart. But Mr. Smith elegantly ignored her excuse. I could have told her not to do it, but she said she would. Since the interview materials were indeed needed by today, I allowed those remaining in HR to help her. So maybe I miscalculated the amount of work to assign? But it's okay, right? It all got resolved in the end. The main issue is this. I've been focusing on sales recently and haven't been able to show my face here much. But I've heard that part-time staff keep quitting because of you. Who said that? They left on their own. It's a nuisance for us that they're so irresponsible, right? She looked around for agreement, but no one consented. Instead, cold stares concentrated on her. Our company values health first, which refers to both physical and mental health. It's fine to work hard, but overloading with work, pressure from superiors, and weakening the spirit are unacceptable. Mr. Smith's voice resonated across the floor, and I almost wanted to applaud. And to burden her, who's been working hard to be filial to her grandparents, with unreasonable demands just for harassment. I find that utterly despicable. It's not like that. And then to barge in on her holiday with her grandparents. What is that about? You're no longer welcome here. What? What are you saying? Go on, get out. Mr. Smith, what did you say? Even I was surprised by this. It's not just between us. I apologize for the Johnson Products matter. We'll ask her to speak to Mrs. Johnson once more. You made a terrible scene at the hotel. And who did you go with? It seemed like she was struck by an unexpected arrow, speechless. I tilt my head, not understanding what it means. I learned of the unreasonable work assigned to her on Friday night. I heard about her trip with her grandparents then. And on Saturday, you suddenly left saying you were going away overnight with a friend. The formidable witch was nowhere to be seen. She now stood there, face pale, trembling. It struck me as odd. The investigation is complete. We'll discuss this further in private. Mr. Smith looked at Mrs. Smith, then addressed the entire floor. Sorry for the disturbance. Everyone, please start your work. I will personally handle the Johnson Products issue. Please bear with us a little longer. Mrs. Smith, now ashen-faced, seemed unable to speak, slumping defeated. A month later, the former president's wife had fallen from grace. It wasn't just bullying of part-timers and female staff, but she had been having an affair with a young male contract employee. It was well known that she targeted women who got along with her favorites, but no one had suspected infidelity. The man she had brought to the trip was the same male contract employee. It was surprising because he was planning to leave after his contract ended and seemed to have been involved with her casually, thinking it was all just a game. When Mr. Smith asked, he apparently spilled everything without much thought. Not the brightest bulb. To think she would risk her life with such a man while married to Mr. Smith, a man of such good character. The lady herself is not too bright either. Meanwhile, our company successfully managed to make a deal with my grandmother's company, as originally planned. Apparently, the deal was sealed thanks to Mr. Smith's prompt and sincere actions after the incident. Johnson Products was already eager, and this only solidified their decision. It's a sobering thought for me, too. At the company, people found out I was the granddaughter of Johnson Products, saying things like, "You got a job on your own? You've got guts. You don't seem like a lady." Which I laughingly replied, "Because I'm not. Huh." Everyone loved me and said, "I'll continue to train hard from now on." And no one changed their attitude. Now, without any worries, I am saving up bit by bit for another trip with my grandparents. It will take time, but wait for me, Grandma and Grandpa. My colleagues, my precious family. I cherish the time I have with the people around me, treasuring it like the most valuable thing.